need to adopt the agenda.
So moved?
Second.
You get that, Sandy?
I did, yep.
And no, this is the revised agenda that was placed out for.
Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, we've got one oath of office this evening for Tom Humphrey for our planning commission.
Sandy, are you gonna do pictures?
Yep.
Have a great evening, Tom. Thank you.
And now we have public comment. Commissioner Wolf, do you want to speak at this point?
Sure, got a couple of things. Sheriff's race is over. Luke Hennon and Jason Harris both were the top two vote getters. So that's I think the November race there. Newmarket Township is right now, as we speak, having a meeting about their new road policy and what's going to happen with that. They're trying to lower their levy over there. They all ran on that, and so they're going to have some engineers there tonight, and they're going through every road and all, every dollars and the cost share and all that stuff. So I'm hoping they can do what they said. So then we're still working on that wheelage tax item. I know you guys remember where people who are out in Webster, they live in Scott County, but they're paying $20 for their wheelage tax in Rice County. We are running into every dead end we find or talk to out at the state of Minnesota. They just simply don't care. They say, well, the dealership has to take care of that. So I kind of thought, well, geez, why don't we just tell every dealership in the state to just put 70 in as the code? That's the Scott County code, by the way. We could give money away at the end of the year. So that's all I have, but we're still working on that. And hopefully we can get that settled up. So, all right?
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. It's 3,000 or 4,000 people for sure.
Okay, now any other public comment? Going once, twice, 3 times, public comment is closed. Consent agenda, any changes? No?
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. No public hearings. General business. A.
Yep, so we have the 2019 Streets Rehabilitation Project. There's 2 items under that. One is a discussion with the council about 2019 Streets Expo, which goes to our COG philosophy of community involvement. And then the second item is to talk just practical issues with regards to ordering a feasibility report, which is a required statutory step if we're going to be doing assessments as part of the project. So I'll turn it over to Rich to go through both items.
I have about a 35-minute presentation that I'll go through.
I miss some.
That's
It's
awesome.
been a
I
while.
heard
presentation.
Wow.
I put it all in the memo, and the intention was if you had questions or would like to discuss it or add anything or say no, this would be the time to go through that. I think for the audience, the idea is just to as part of next year's street rehabilitation projects, we would normally have a public hearing, which we will do anyway as part of the assessments. But we usually also have some informal type meetings that make it easier for people to come and get information, a little more flexible, relaxed atmosphere. And the idea is to expand that to other topics of interest to try and get a broader audience and share other information about things related to streets like pedestrian safety and the roundabout project, and so just to kind of bring more of the community together for, and since we're having a meeting anyway, let's just make it broader. So in a nutshell, that's what we're talking about with this expo.
So how does the council feel about the expo idea?
I love the idea.
There's obviously some time and resources that would be required for it. We've actually, as staff, been talking about this concept for a year and a half, knowing that this was coming up. It's kind of based on the approach we took with regards to the Water Expo. For those that you might remember that, when we were having, before we built the water treatment plant, we were having concerns about water bills, we were having concerns about water quality related to the radium issue, we were having concerns about the impacts of building a new water treatment facility, and just a whole number of questions. And so we had a Water Expo, which kind of wrapped up all those common related topics, and it was fairly well attended. And so we thought we would try doing a similar item related to road projects, as you can see from the memo. But if the council really doesn't want to go there, we don't want to spend time and resources on it. So we're kind of basically looking for a blessing on it, if you agree with it.
I
think it's cool.
Yeah, given the extent of all these projects, yeah. that's
For the
good.
amount of money that's gonna be spent, it's probably a good idea for, especially when some of them are gonna, there's gonna be assessments involved.
I agree 100%.
100% needs to be done.
Okay, then we'll move forward with that.
That was easy.
Yeah.
Well, you'll get the details about the timing and stuff, but I assume it will accommodate for people that are working and all that stuff, so.
We're leaning towards an evening event
Huh.
during a weeknight, probably in the latter part of September.
Cool.
That's when, about the time then the Water Expo was, if I remember right. It was later in the evening, and there were a lot of people there.
I think that one was a Saturday
I think so
afternoon.
too, yeah.
Yep.
But there was a lot of people.
Yeah, we had a good, of course, we gave away a couple of pretty nice prizes, but, so that would be a topic if the council wants to come up
No.
with some spiff to increase the attractiveness, that's always a.
No, I mean,
Otherwise, we're thinking popcorn, cookies, and coffee.
I think Bolton and Mink could give away their box tickets to the Vikings game or something like that, you know?
I'll put in for that.
All right.
Just one game is all we need.
Castle
Maybe-
might
maybe
have
the
those locked up.
Maybe the Green Bay game or something.
Yeah.
Agree, yeah, all right.
Right.
That's a good idea.
Mhm.
I thought so.
I think it might be a Monday night game
We can
too.
put that into the contract next time.
Yeah, that ship has left the dock, but there's always other times, I guess.
Well, you know, we can start over and do 30 days notice, and then,
Yeah.
they might go for that now.
Rates could go up, it's, you know, tight job market.
So Rich, do you want to talk about feasibility study and the purpose it serves and the whole project process and the assessment process?
Well, yeah, well, other than Woodcrest, but those were voluntary, and so we took care of the hearings and stuff through waivers. But the normal special assessment process, you have to give, basically it's due process to the people that will be affected. They have to be informed about the project and understand what it is, get an idea of the cost. So you have, basically there's two public hearings. The first one is for that purpose. So we do the feasibility report, which lays out, here's what the problem is, here's some ways to address it, here's what we recommend, here's what we think it'll cost, here's when you should do it, and here's how we think you should pay for it. We anticipate for the street rehabilitations projects, portion of that, which is per your standing written assessment policy, will be assessed to the benefiting property owners. It may not be a big dollar amount, but it'll be enough that they're gonna wanna know about it, and you have to tell them. So you have that public hearing after the feasibility report is done. At that point, the council decides yes or no, we're gonna do the project. You do the project, then you have to have a second hearing called an assessment hearing, where you've worked out exactly what the assessments will be, when they'll be levied, and it gives them an opportunity to come and say, if they object, then it opens up some rights for them. If they don't object at that point, then their rights to appeal expire. So there's a lengthy, detailed process. We can walk through that more during the feasibility presentation, but basically it's about giving the affected people the information they need to say, yeah, I'm in, or I'm opposed, and then we work through that.
The reality is the feasibility study is also the detailed project scope for,
Yep.
that would be used for making.
It's a required step.
Yes.
But it's also, but the nature of it and the detail is required for
Right.
for the assessment process.
How many people, and I've heard in other cities, the certain streets that where there's assessments, a large number of the people appealed the assessment.
It's, and I think it's all over the map. I've had none, I've had one, never lost one.
But this is not a reconstruction project. Those are much more extensive and expensive. So like we did downtown, Elko, we had no appeals on those assessments. We had one, I think, in, what was it, in the Elko side. I don't think we had any on Newmarket. When we did 265th, there was, I think, one appeal of an apartment or something. But it was a pretty minor item. But these were fairly big assessments. We didn't assess all the costs, but a portion of it. So the higher the assessment is, the more likely people are gonna say, hey, my property value is not gonna go up by that much, and they're willing to go through. It's not easy to appeal. I mean, they're gonna probably want representation because they have to make a case in court if they take it all away, that this assessment doesn't raise their property value that much. For smaller amounts like these, it's probably more trouble than it's worth. That doesn't mean they couldn't and wouldn't have the right to, but I would not expect to see really any of these.
Part of this process is for the council to determine whether or not they reasonably benefit that amount when we do the assessments.
I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
I think that as long as the city's doing a good job up front of evaluating exactly the assessment issue, the fair market value of the property and how much it's going to go up, the benefit issue,
Yep.
you're less likely to have any challenges. And I can only think of twice in my years where we've had the large assessment with one of our cities, where you get a lot of people appealing.
You may get, I've seen a lot of objections, but then they have to take the next step, and that is a higher burden, so they drop off pretty quickly. The other thing I think that helps is being selective, doing projects when they need to be done, not any sooner.
Right.
They have to see that there's a need, and then
There's
it's,
a common sense, and this is part of the driver for the expo too. The more you can communicate and get people information, if the first time they hear about it is when fairly deep into the process, they have all kinds of questions, and that's where you have more emotion than objectivity when you're having about it. Things like the expo and those informal neighborhood meetings, aside from the formal meetings, allow opportunities to answer those questions for people, and then they can make better decisions about, okay, is this make sense? Does it not make sense? So communication up front is huge.
Sweet.
so what we're asking is to authorize that study. Get this thing
Do we
rolling.
need a motion for
Yeah,
that?
we need a
Yeah.
motion to adopt resolution 1847.
Motion to adopt resolution 1847, ordering preparation of feasibility report.
You want this one?
You get that, Sam? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. You just needed direction on the expo?
Yes.
Okay. Number 9, reports, administration.
First item under reports, Steve is not here tonight, so I'm handling it for him. We need one or two, or would like one or two council members to serve on the second round interview panel. And as we've talked in the past, the purpose for those council people is basically to help determine the fit to the communities. Is that personality, the nature of the officer we want to have coming to the door? By that time, they've generally been largely vetted with regards to minimum qualifications and those types of things in the first round of the interview and through the process. But we're asking you as council people to come in as citizens and say, yeah, this would be a good police officer in our community. Historically, we've had two council people to get a greater breadth of opinion on that. Historically, Bob has done it for several years. I think our last hires since 2000 and
I think I've been there for 6 years, ever
Yeah.
since I started.
Bob's done it several times. Trish has done the last few in the past. We're just asking for the council to make
I'm in.
the appointment.
I would like to continue because I've been doing it, and I think we've hired some pretty good officers.
We have, but don't you think it might be a good idea to have some different voices or different faces doing the interviews? I'd kinda like to do it. I've been part of one interview panel and,
And I was gonna do it last time, and then I got the new job, which is why I had to bow out, and which is why Trish, I think, stepped in
Oh.
the last one. So, I mean, I would still love to do it, and now that I've been there for 3 months, I can screw the job. I'm off probation, and we're good.
no reflection, Mayor, on your, your input. It's not a bad idea to get new voices and new ideas and new thoughts, new questions, new observations. So I'd personally really like to do it. And Josh,
I would love to.
same boat as well.
Same reason I wanted to last time, and then situation changed, and I don't expect it to change again, but.
Kate, are you wanting to do it too?
No,
Just make it a council meeting.
I think that it would be nice to have two fresh faces, new faces into the mix. And then, just my thought.
So before we go too far, I should talk about time commitment.
It's like a day commitment.
It's
Yeah.
a little over half a day, usually about anywhere from 3 to 5 hours, depending on the number of applicants that we interview.
It's worth it. I'll take the day off of work.
I personally would still like to stay on it because it's one of the, it's the one thing that I really enjoy in this, that, to be totally honest.
Well, I mean, you serve on a lot of different things, Bob. I mean.
And most of them I go just to represent the city.
Sure.
This is something that I feel strongly about.
Well, how do we resolve this?
Yeah.
If you can't reach a consensus, you make a motion and you have a majority vote, just like any other appointment.
I'll make a motion for Josh and I to represent the city.
Second.
Well, I haven't resigned, and I was appointed to this to start with at the beginning of the year. I have been.
I'm just following Tom's instruction. He needs to
I don't
recommend
know
a
that we have
motion.
specific appointments to the interview panel.
No.
No, as part of the annual appointments, it's always been a case-by-case basis, Bob.
I'll second.
Okay. So a motion by Councilman Julie,
Yep.
second by Councilman Timmerman.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye.
You opposed?
From a timing standpoint, we have determined our interview pool. We'll be contacting them we'll be doing the scheduling next week. We'll have to get through the first round, but we'll be contacting you, Joe, and Josh about your availability for the second round. So when we have Parliament for the first, we would just take the approach. If you make it past, you need to plan for a second interview on this date. So we'll probably be contacting you early next week.
Sounds good.
Okay. Number 2?
It's my understanding that the council had requested a scheduled discussion on council mileage reimbursement policy. I prepared a quick memo for the council on this topic. You will note that we have an extensive policy on mileage reimbursement that consists of 2 sentences. To be honest, this has been our mileage reimbursement policy since we established the employee handbook back in 2006. And at that time, I'll be blunt, the council was not engaged externally at all. Although it is in the employee handbook, we've generally applied the same philosophy. If it's related to city business, we reimburse for it. With regards to an employee, it's really simple. The supervisor determines, yeah, that was a legitimate mileage or it wasn't. It's really straightforward. And for the most part, with the exception of administrative staff, police department and fire department and public works generally take city vehicles to those types of things. For the council, same type of thing. It's inferred that if it's city business, it's reimbursed, but it leaves quite a bit of discretion to the individual officials as to what they're going to submit for, and really doesn't leave much criteria for disputing it. So generally, if it has some loose associate, so the over the years, the logic I've used is if it's related to city business and it's not exclusively for personal or political purposes, it's a legitimate expense, and it gets forwarded to the council for approval. Councils have always had the ability to dispute it, but you guys typically don't see the full detail when you receive it, but you see the dollar amounts. We've seen an increase in council mileage over the years because the council's become much more engaged, which I think is a good thing externally. But we've gone from a few $100 a year up to, this year we're closing in on 4,000. So it's not a bad idea for the council to have a discussion on this, and if nothing else, maybe provide some clarity if they want to place any sort of boundaries on eligible mileage or expense beyond how we're handling it now. If we're okay with it, that's great. But it might not be a bad idea just to have something specific to council.
Well, and I kind of brought this up a meeting or two ago, I don't remember which one it was. So I just want to preface this whole conversation with the fact that I do think that the vast majority of the stuff that everybody's doing is totally valid and worth it. So I don't want this I would love to see this not as a conversation of, past meetings and things like that, because I do think there's been a lot of great meetings and time spent and energy and then things that have showed for it. So I'm not trying to imply that or have this discussion to say that none of it was worth it at all or that anything was completely invalid. But it just brings up the point, which we had in the budget discussion too, is how much do we want to see spent by taxpayer dollars on this, and or be able to explain it and whatever, so that we can justify it. And so I don't know if I even framed that right or whatever, but I don't want it to seem as though I'm saying that, Bob, you go to a ton of meetings, so your mileage is up there. I don't want it to sound like I don't think that has been a poor reflection of time used or mileage spent or money spent. I think it is a good time to discuss it, and so.
I don't think it hurts to have more defined parameters. Where we're gonna get into, I think a challenge in this conversation is, how do we classify what is effective city business? How are we using our time? And the only reason I bring that aspect up, is I remember last year kind of having a similar discussion where we were talking about budgets, and we were talking about mileages and trying to find ways to save money in different areas. So I don't have any ideas necessarily on how we can more closely define what should be done, or if things need to be approved by council, if they exceed a certain parameter, or I'd be looking to staff for ideas.
So, I was advised, the council advised us not to spend a lot of time on this, but we did do a little checking around. In the little bit of checking around, and this is by no means a scientifically valid sample, but the checking around, most cities don't have, it's left to a large degree up to the council to determine. There are a few that have policies out there, and those are ones that are a little more restrictive, where it's basically you don't get mileage for anything that you're not appointed to. And in those cases, generally the way they handle it is it's a per diem. You get per diems for this. I don't recommend doing the per diem, because then it doesn't become a discussion about mileage, but it starts becoming, oh, did they really go to the meeting? How long did they stay at the meeting? You've heard other governing bodies that you're familiar with have had those kinds of discussions in the past. I think it's better just to have a flat stipend for council or monthly salary, and that just covers it, and then just pay for mileage. I think it's hard. I think if you are to put parameters on it, I think it would be easier to say these are things that are not eligible, rather than say these things that are. I'm just thinking about a good example that occurred recently. So you say, oh, it's only things that you're appointed to. Well, Bob called me a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and it's the roundtable.
Roundtable, yeah.
And says, hey, I got an invitation to go to a congressional candidates roundtable to go pitch our projects to this candidate. I don't think
Well, it
anybody.
wasn't just a candidate, there were sitting congressmen from other states that were coming.
Yeah, so I don't think anybody here would say that's a bad idea. That's a bad idea. But to try and anticipate those types of things that don't fit neatly in the box, I think is harder to do than to just say, these are things that we clearly don't, if you want to place certain parameters on it.
Can I make a suggestion? So people should go do what they feel they need to do. I mean, we're all elected to serve in the best interest of the city. Maybe if we could get like a monthly report that just summarizes what the mileage expense was for council members. I don't know how time consuming that would be, but it would be a tool that we could look at to utilize where we are in relation to our budget and how that money is being spent.
One problem the only problem I see is I go to be honest, for the number of things that I'm invited to represent our city at, and the number of things that I go to are really pretty small. It's gotta be something where I see a benefit to our city to go to. I mean, if there's people there that are going to help us that I can get to know, then I will go.
I'm not pointing a finger at you.
No, I'm just saying with the way I work this, I'm the one that probably does it the most, because I'm the one with the most time.
So there's a couple of things that I would say related to that. One is council people, even with city staff, you have a range of what people submit mileage for.
True.
So, for example, I tend to try where I can schedule meetings at the beginning or end of my day. If they're anywhere in the South Metro at all, I just consider that's going to work, and I don't charge the mileage to go to that meeting. Mark Nagel, given his commute, he schedules meetings on his way there and back, and if it's a little bit off the path, he doesn't charge mileage for it. A lot of our staff, if they're just doing stuff around town, unless they're leaving town, they don't even think about charging it unless it's a regular thing that generates high numbers for mileage. I know over the years council have done the same things. I'm going up to work in Minneapolis, and I-35 is in Bloomington. It's in the morning, and I'm going on the way. I'm just going to stop on the way. I'm not going to charge for mileage for that. So there is a presentation. The other thing I want to point out is I have been in cities where they have detail has been provided related to mileage. It's available at any time upon request, but as part of a regular basis, whether it's for reimbursement of expenses and those types of things. Inevitably, it becomes a political item. When I started here, the first several meetings, that was a practice here, and we would spend time at the beginning of meeting as different, not saying you guys would, but I'm talking down the road, political factions would use expense and mileage things to take shots at other people in a public setting. I'm not saying you would, and I'm not saying council, but I have seen it happen, and it can happen, and so I would prefer that this just, if you have a policy that has parameters, then it just kind of flows smoothly and it's taken care of.
Yes, I just want to make sure we're on top of controlling the budget. That's my biggest concern with this process.
So on that one, as we're going through, there's a couple ways we can do it. One is you just see large ones come through, an individual council person can just request detail at any time. It's really not that hard to pull. I mean, Bob submits maybe 4 requests a year. You guys are about the same. So it's not hard to go pull the requests for any given month or a year to date. It's not a lot of pieces of paper to pull, whether it's how much we paid out or where we're sitting year to date. That's fairly easy to do. That would be one way that we could approach it. So you're just sitting there and going, okay, we know that the budget's 3,000 and we're got to be getting close to that, and we're only in August or whatever. That would be one way to do it. The other way to do it, we could provide on that specific item when we have requests come through. We could add something on the report, but it's just an extra thing. We just tell our finance person when you're running the report, you just have to put a little note on the side of that one that's the year to date expense on that.
Well, Mayor, what works best for you?
Well, what were you saying?
I was just going to ask you, what works best for you?
Well, basically the way I've worked it for myself is if there was something I wasn't sure about, and usually it's something that I'm invited to represent the city, I talk to Tom and say, does this look like it's something that would makes sense where our city should be represented there, or there would, if it comes that works right, that we would get some kind of benefit out of it, either now or in the near future or the far future. And so I talked to Tom first, just like I did on the roundtable. And we talked about it. I told him what exactly it was. And he said, well, yeah, I mean, the mayor is the spokesperson for the city.
Right.
He's supposed to be going to those things, and making requests to other congressmen never hurts, because if there's two congressmen from Michigan that now know that Elko Newmarket is in Minnesota, so if it ever gets an earmark at the federal level, you know, oh, I've heard of that.
Sure. Josh,
I mean, well, I don't know, I mean, I don't know.
So here's a practical issue too. So right now, there isn't a lot of parameters on it. Like I said, it's pretty wide open. So from a practical standpoint, it doesn't hurt for the council to just have discussion, even if the discussion and the ultimate decision is we've clearly discussed it and the way it's being handled now is okay. Because then there's something to fall back to if anybody comes back after the fact and says, well, how are you doing it? How are you making these decisions? If somebody wants to, from the public wants to come in and make a comment on that, you've provided clarification and there's been clear discussion on it. I'll be honest, we haven't had a lot of discussion on this topic because from a dollar amount standpoint, it's been relatively small over the years historically.
Well, and I think there's just, as we talked through it over the last couple of weeks, I think there's a lot of gray in it too, that it has to come into consideration. So I am now on the I-35s thing. Well, then there's maybe a subgroup that's gonna talk about this. Now I go to that potentially, and then, so I mean, there's just so many things where it can grow really quickly, and
Sometimes that growth really, by you participating in a subgroup at I-35, I don't know if it's occasionally they will, but.
Well, so that's not a crazy thing. So it might happen, I'll use I-35 hypothetically, you go to that and we're there. Boy, you just got elected to the finance committee, Kate. So now you have a finance committee meeting that you have to go to. Okay, that still makes sense. Well, while you're at the finance committee meeting, the administrative person that supports it says, well, you know what, we need to go to the state capitol and now we need to lobby on this other topic. I know you and you're aware of this topic because you're in I-35, but it starts becoming degrees of separation. Mm-hmm. And that's where, at some point, is it volunteerism or is it doing it or is it all fine because you're going and you're networking and it has some loose association. And that's where that gray is it becomes a little bit harder to discern.
What if we just quarterly, you would tell us where we're at?
Can do
as far as
that.
our
That's
budget
easy enough
goes?
to do.
I mean,
Just so that we can kind of, because then we're not getting to the end of the year and our budget's 4,000 and we're at 39 in
I mean-
August, then we're like, okay, whoa, people have got to, I don't know, I don't ever,
No, I like what you're
I don't
saying.
ever submit because I figure this is what I've signed up for. I don't ever put anything in. So I don't quite I don't get it. I never will. I think you signed up for it, you're donating your time to the city, and that's just something that I knew would happen. So I have a hard time with any gas mileage for council members being paid back, but that's just me. But I think if we could get a quarterly report and see where we're at, I think that would be nice.
Well, I'm just, talking kind of on those gray areas, if you would go to the Capitol to testify, you would be testifying as a council person from Elko Newmarket.
Right, but I still would never put my gas mileage in for that. That's just me. I decided to do this but I guess, if we can just get a quarterly report so that we know where we're at. Each council member has to come and do their own thing of what they feel they should do. What I do, what Joe does, what Josh does, what Mayor Bob does is totally irrelevant. We still have a budget we have to stay in with, so.
I think that varies on what our financial situation is at the time, how much time we put in doing these things and driving to these places. I've got.
We're not, I don't think
Yeah,
anyone's
we're not-
saying
No, I'm
it's
just saying-
restricted.
Yeah,
It's just, we just,
trying to
Each
come
person
to a
has their own-
conclusion. Right, everybody has their own way of what they wanna do, and there's no problem with that. But I just wanna make certain we don't get sticker shock when we look at it again in a year and we're like, holy buckets, we're
What I-
over our budget, you know?
What I'm hearing is that seems to be a desire of the council having greater awareness of what mileage we're paying for and where we are during the year in case there needs to be
Unless we need to pull the reins back a little bit and say,
Mhm.
okay, maybe we need to reevaluate what we're going to, or what we're considering, or what we personally think is council worthy to be paid out.
Or as we start taking over the South Metro, eventually the Twin Cities, and we're going to everything, we'll just have to up our budget, but then we'll be able to justify it and talk through that process.
Correct,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, one thing I'm gonna say that's really kind of strange, but at the policy committee meetings for Metro Cities and the League of Minnesota Cities, this year, every suggestion that I have put forward has been enacted. And the funny thing is, our vote at those meetings counts the same as the vote of Minneapolis or St. Paul,
So,
so.
Mr. Mayor, I think that's going down a different.
No,
path
I'm
than
just
you're
saying that
talking
these
about.
things, I'm just saying that there is an importance, because Kate is saying, well, maybe we'd have to rein back. So what do?
Maybe the individual that's submitting them says, I'm going to do this out of the courtesy of my own heart and go to these meetings and not actually bill the community for it.
Or I would say you treat it like your checkbook. I mean, you only have X amount of money to spend, so just make sure you're,
Within that
and
budget.
when I say you, again, Bob, I'm not trying to point
Mhm.
fingers at you, it's just in general. I'd like us to be able to look and see where we're at, and like, okay, we've taxed the people of Elko New Market X amount of dollars. We need to stick to that budget, and if we as a council, like Kate suggested, could get more reporting on it, then that's a tool that we as council members and mayor can use to make good decisions.
What I'm hearing is this is no different, although the budget's much smaller, relatively speaking, the council's saying we are the department head of our own department,
Right.
legislative, and we have our biggest line item at the moment, aside from salary, is mileage, and it may not be the biggest line item in the budget,
Right.
but we want to be able to manage it. So just like Corey, he's getting to the end of the summer, he's going, okay, I'm running out of street maintenance dollars, I have to make a decision, I either have to rein back, or we still have work we need to do, I need to go to the council, I need to go to Tom, and I need to make sure it's okay to overspend that line
And then when we
item.
have these budget discussions, you can say, look, this wasn't enough. I had a lot of other events I needed to be at. I could have helped the city more had I been that, and make the case to why we should increase that budget. I mean, I don't think that's an unreasonable ask.
Well,
it's fair.
I think it's kind of, it falls in kind of like when we were talking about the budgets for the training and conferences. If they end up going over that, then we talk about it the next year.
I don't think it's a perfect parallel, because
Right.
that's budget, that's money that's just never been used, or very
No,
rarely ever been used.
But here's the thing, so then what do we do if we run it, under budget, there's things going on, and then the last 4 months, we stop going to scale, we stop going to executive committee meetings and all that?
Well, I think we have whatever the frequency of transparency and openness of discussion about this, and then we can decide, no, I mean, we're making good progress in certain things, we continue to go. But we do that on a more frequent basis versus twice a year or once a year or whatever, to be able to say, hey, we're on top of it, we're watching the budget, we're actually paying attention, and this is why we're going above budget for the next 3 months, because we know that there's value behind it. And
Yeah, then we're having a discussion about it.
Some of those things aren't quantifiable in dollars and cents at the time that you're talking about them.
You don't
No,
have
but you
to,
can be fiscally responsible and pay attention quarterly what you're spending on your budget to see where you're at. And then if we come to September and we know we still have 3 months left of the year, but we only have $100 left on our budget, we all know there's scale. We all know that there's 50 by 30. We all know that there's meetings that we still have to attend to, that people are gonna wanna submit mileage for. You still do those, but at least at that point, we've all been fiscally responsible in saying, okay, we've gotten here, yes, these meetings are important, yes, we are going to approve going over our budget. but we need to be aware of it. We don't want to come a year from now going, holy buckets, how did it get so out of line? That's the part I have a problem with. You don't run a business, any business, and say at the end of the year, oh, well, it was worth it, I just had to go over budget. No, you can't do that. You can't run a positive business doing that. You have to be fiscally responsible and paying attention to your line items. I go through it daily. Every single day I'm looking at my line items. I'm not asking to do that here. Quarterly is fine.
I'm gonna say something. One of the meetings that I've been going to, and they're held probably 6 times a year, that I go to the Met Council sewer meetings. And I've been doing that for 3 years. And I would say the first 2 years, I really didn't see a whole lot of benefit. Right now, Ned Smith, the finance director of the Met Council Sewer, is working on a program to lower our sewer surcharge on commercial and industrial property.
Well, there it is quantifiable then.
Now it is, but it wasn't 2 years ago.
But that's still a case you could have made 2 years ago.
But
since we're on
Bob, that was the reason that you were going.
That was the
to
reason,
support
I mean,
that, so-
That's what we're saying.
every meeting that I've been going to, I've told Tom, I have a reason for, I go to the extra meetings and on the subcommittee at MVTA that has gotten us to the point where they're offering a bus program.
But I want to go back to what you were saying with the Met Council, because that is a perfect example. You know, all we're really saying is we want to be aware
Oh,
of
what
where
the
we're at
reason-
from a budget standpoint. Not even necessarily the reason, but if we, you know, let's say we're having this meeting now and we're saying, geez, Bob, you spent a lot of money on going to this. That's your opportunity to then say, yeah, this is why. I'm building these relationships, and over the long term, this is gonna help the city in X, Y, Z way. And then okay, I mean, we work together. There's 4 of us, normally 5, so we all should.
And it's not like we're
Be
gonna
aware.
tell you, you have to stop. It's just putting it in the
Well-
forefront of our brains and our minds of what's happening. Where's the money going? How much are we at today? You know?
Josh, you
Well,
brought this up, you're not even talking.
You guys, I simply wanted to have the discussion. You know, it was a lot. We've beat it like a dead horse completely over and over. I think we can, if we have more discussion, more transparency, quarterly, totally cool. It's more than what we've had right now. You know, what caught my eye was the $900,000 one for the last quarter, and that was a lot.
It wasn't a quarter either, I turned it in.
But it was for 3 months.
It was for more months.
No, it was 3. But anyway, you know, we're having a discussion. It's out there. I mean, I think, again, there's a lot of gray in it. So, you know, I don't want to say no. Of course, we're going to have to do what's in the best interest. And I think if we have these discussions throughout the year, we'll be able to justify it, talk through it. Maybe not, and then we still have that discussion, and that's okay. But I just.
What I'm hearing is you guys want to have a more frequent value discussion.
Yeah.
All of your time is valuable. Bob's time's valuable, Josh, Joe, Kate, and whoever's gonna, you know, and other council people in the future, and you're just saying, it's a good idea to decide where we put our time, where we're getting the best use of return, whether it's time or mileage, but it's getting the return. As I'm sitting here, that seems to be, it's not so much about the policy.
Right.
It's
No.
basically saying, where are we making time investments?
Right.
And that's probably.
Mileage is just an aspect of that, so.
And I think that's probably goes back to the fact that that's why most meetings that I'm gonna go to, unless they're regular scheduled ones, I'm having a discussion with Tom about it.
So ultimately, Mr. Mayor, if I'm hearing you right, you're not disagreeing with us.
No,
I mean,
I'm
it
not.
sounds like you think it is fair that we do look at
Yeah,
this.
I think we keep looking at it, yeah. But there's got to, you know,
So do we have some consensus then on that?
I think we've got some direction. What we'll do is, we'll prepare a quarterly report that basically said, here's the mileage claims that we've had year-to-date or this quarter for these types of activities and the mileage associated with it. And the council can have discussions about, okay, how much time is that really taking? Or how much time investment are we making? How much of an investment are we making in that? And is that the best? Is that where we should be putting our time and resources? So
I like that. That's very good.
Yeah, maybe if we could host some of these meetings down here instead of having to drive up to St. Paul. Trying to drive there.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I'm just saying, we could host it.
I would love to be able to do that.
That is the disadvantage of being.
Well, it's just a function of where we are.
On the
too.
fringe
Yeah.
and the
Wow.
facilities and, some of that, some of the, to host some of those meetings, to put out the goodies and stuff that they do.
It's more expensive.
That's probably a good point.
And,
Cookies aren't cheap.
well, I know, this week I got to spend an hour speaking to the chair of the Met Council because I got to a meeting early. And she was there early, so we talked for a long time.
All right.
And I don't think that's gonna hurt us.
Nope. Well,
So, anyway, are we done with that? You've got direction?
Yes.
Okay. No public works, police, fire, engineering,
Nothing to report.
community development?
Just kidding, Rich. I like your reporters.
I understand.
Best report ever.
The first item under community development updates is just discussion regarding the property at 261 Main Street. I don't have a PowerPoint or anything, but there was some information in the packet that should guide the discussion. Staff is aware that the property has been foreclosed on and may be coming on the market in the near future. The city has adopted a downtown master plan. The single-family home on the property is a non-conforming use. It doesn't fit into the city's future vision for the property. It's property zoned R5, which is more of a downtown residential intended for multifamily housing with potentially some retail or service integrated in with that. Examples would be, in Shakopee or Savage, where they have retail on the first floor with housing up above, or just strictly housing. Also, shortly after the creation of the city's EDA, there was a property acquisition policy adopted by the city that is intended to guide the city's decisions regarding property acquisition. So I guess staff's feeling is this would meet the policy should the council be interested in pursuing that option. Thanks, Rich. And we kind of laid out a scenario that might pay for the property. Should you think that would be the thing to do? Yes, it's not.
We want to sway something out and see if it's reasonable that we could be faster. So this is one main kind of scenarios that are out there, and it's based on our assumption. We don't have certain pieces of information about the property. We simply have, we don't.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important what Tom stated. This is not a recommendation from staff. This is information from staff for your consideration. It's just the opportunity may.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay.
So really, all we're looking for is direction from the council. Do we spend time on this or not? That's the long and short. We don't want to spend a lot of time doing research and pursuing it if the council doesn't have any interest in doing so. That being said, this is what I would say is an if-then kind of process. We would get more information, we would refine the assumptions, bring it back, and there would be steps along the process where the council at any time can basically call no joy, and we would just back out of the process. But we also don't want to spend time and resources on it if there's no appetite for the council to pursue it at all.
So what would we do with the property?
It would be a long-term goal that we would be doing property someday.
So immediately, assuming we don't do the rental option, would we just kind of bulldoze the house and leave the land vacant?
I mean, if you can't find a reasonable, I wouldn't leave a vacant building there. That's part of the analysis. If we were, yep, and we would have no revenue source to offset the acquisition either. So that would be part of the analysis that we would do is it a viable rental property or not? We'll do some additional market research when it's listed. What is it actually being listed for? What do you think the acquisition would be? if we do acquire it and we do want to rent it out, getting better numbers for, is there rehab that has to be done on the property? That's a reasonable assumption anytime you're acquiring a previous rental property, that you're gonna have to go in and do at least some amount of interior finishes, and there may be things like the roof or other structural stuff that we need to do as well.
Renee, how long has the property been vacant?
It has not been vacant very long.
Not very long?
I think they just moved out. It's not been a long time. It's owner occupied.
Is it owner occupied?
Yeah, it was owner occupied until this point.
The property immediately to the east, between it and the commercial building, that's been vacant for a number of years.
Okay,
The
I would
properties
just,
on both sides are vacant and have lost their non-conforming
okay,
status. So
that's why I wasn't sure,
they could
if
not
this-
be rented out for residential purposes.
Okay,
This
so
one
this-
could be.
so this one, we've got plenty of time to, if we would acquire it, to do the work on it, to rent it out.
We have a little-
I just want to say I am very strongly opposed to us looking to turn this into a rental property. I just don't see that as the role of the city in any way, shape, or form. I'm for pursuing it, I just, not turn it into a rental property, and then all of a sudden you're competing against individuals who are renting out properties.
One thing, I'm looking at this one and looking at the price of the last home that I think we purchased was considerably cheaper.
The last one that we purchased was on a capital.
Right.
That basically suffered hundreds of thousands of dollars of water leakage in the foundation.
Right.
We call it the fun house because there was some straight wall left in there.
Oh, it's this house, all right.
Yeah.
See, I think at that time we talked about it, that that's the kind of house we wanted to get rid of, because we could acquire the property cheap enough for assemblage that it wouldn't be, and it's actually being used for public purpose right now, right?
Correct, it was adjacent, so the rationale on that particular, but we have criteria that go beyond just.
Right.
So, long and short, to summarize it is, it's blight, or it's in a key location for land assemblage or redevelopment locations in the downtown area. In this case, this property has declined, so I wouldn't say it's quite to blight, but it is suffering from deferred maintenance, clearly, if you look at the pictures and the history of the property. But in this case, it's in a key location in an area where you really won't be able to see much for development unless you do land assemblage, and that's really why we're suggesting it. We believe that if we don't do it, it would likely be acquired and turned into marginal rental property, which means that it will be a marginal rental property for a long time. And it will eventually be assembled at a extremely high premium cost rather than a regular market rate cost.
Most recent inquiry that I received on this property was about 3 years ago when I was just working on neighborhood for the city. Casey's General Store had identified this area for possible development of Casey's store, and they'd actually drawn up site plans and everything that would have required acquisition of two properties. There's two properties.
So they'd like to come back.
I've called. That would not have met the current zone, that would have required a rezoning of property, but anyways, redevelopment, so. So feedback is, just continue to research it, okay.
Based on the feedback,
Okay.
The only way I could see the city is affordable rental, where we put something in that's at 30% or of income, and we were renting it to somebody, where we could say we were doing something as a city.
I just feel it's best left for private parties and investors to, and I don't think we go down that road, that as a city.
No, I agree with you, except for the fact for land assemblage, and if we say I mean, there's other grants we could probably get as a city to help cover the cost if it was turned into affordable rental.
It's kind of a philosophical piece on my end.
Not, and I don't disagree with you, I don't,
Yeah.
but the cities do get involved in subsidizing affordable rentals one way or another. And this would be a cheap way to do it for the city.
You're right, but I do think we impact the market. You know, we take over property, even if it becomes affordable housing, that has a trickle-down impact on any other landowners that are looking to do something similar. I think it would be best suited trying to attract more developers.
But if a developer came in and wanted to turn it into an affordable rental, then I would support that.
Josh, you
We may find out when we get into it that it just doesn't make sense. It's not a viable rental property anyways, just because the work that would have to be done, et cetera, and the numbers don't work. But it makes a difference in the pro forma prerequisite if you have something that can generate potentially any sort of revenue versus you're gonna take it and now you're also gonna incur the costs of demolition and tearing it down. So, which is fine, we're happy to do either one, but it's a good philosophical discussion, but some direction up front would help as we're moving forward when we're coming back and making recommendations about its viability or not.
Oh, and I'm not strongly to the side of saying no, absolutely not. So I mean, I think having the information, if it's not too much to add on to it, you've already probably done some of that work already and have thought through it, so I think it would be helpful. And yeah, I'm just not.
Just for information purposes, so we know. If it's not, it can't be used as a rental or gonna be really expensive, the price is gonna go down considerably
It would be
too.
information to aid in that philosophical discussion.
Yeah, and we can have that discussion at that time. I mean, I'm assuming it's not something that's gonna take a ton of staff resources. I mean, you've done a lot of the work already on here.
No, a lot of what we would need to do is A, see what the property is listed for, B, be able to get some sort of an assessment of the property, its physical condition. You know, we have to work up those numbers that right now we're just kind of spitballing. And then just plug them into where we're at, and then we take a finer look at what our funding options are at that point in time.
One offset to the rental too, I think, to be considered is that if you go to redevelop, depending on how long it is before you actually do that process, the city could be subject to, by terminating the lease for some sort of redevelopment, you could have relocation costs, which would offset some of your benefits to renting too.
And that can be in the $10,000
That
to
could be,
$20,000.
yeah, cost of finding a new location and then moving expenses. And, yeah.
They ain't gonna do all that work.
And then you have to get a relocation expert to, so.
Okay,
You guys have
Yes.
direction?
yes,
Thank you.
thanks. And community development updates, just a couple things. The updates were in the packet. Looks like we're going to be issuing an early grading permit on Christmas Pines. Gary Tupie has not entered into the development contract that you approved previously that would allow him to go full-fledged ahead, but he has asked if he could get a grading permit to begin some work on the site. Moving on to Kevin Komorowski's development, Como Builders. The annexation petition received on July 26th. We're currently in discussions with the township. We hope that we'll have an orderly annexation agreement for you to approve at your next council meeting. We're hopeful of that. Discussions have been good with the township. I think through the last process, annexation that you went through, that's when a township representative was appointed to the planning commission, and he's been a good point of communication for me during this process. So, there is in Pete's Hill Park, there is a development group being formed to move that project forward. I've been told by the broker and have been contacted by a closing company working on the property transfer into the new entity, so that's hopeful. Dakota Acres, the purchase agreement for the westerly portion of the property. We're still in that due diligence period. There were some provisions in the purchase agreement that we provide a survey which has been done, title commitment which has been done, and then they have the opportunity to basically have some assurance that they're going to be able to use the property how they intend. They intend to use it to construct 3 apartment buildings. They've decided that they would like to request a rezoning of the property to high-density residential. It's currently zoned PUD that references an old townhouse development. Rezoning the property to high-density residential would basically guarantee them that they could construct an apartment building on it, over 8 units. It's been discussed with Andrea, and we don't see any reason not to consent to that rezoning, so they have indicated that will be submitted for the next planning commission meeting. So
The only downside is with PUD, it's off the zoning for that townhome development, so it would give the city more control, so to speak. But if you're okay with anything that complies with high-density zoning going there, then that's a non-issue, and it would remove a time barrier and expense barrier to having, down the road, to having it. And if this project goes away, we still have a piece of property that's guided for higher density residential in that location.
But this might be a dumb question, but this is the same group that had done the other, or is working on finishing up the other townhome. I had stopped out there and talked to some residents who were pretty livid with kind of how the association's being ran. There's giant potholes in front of people's driveways, just maintenance is not getting done. Is that something that we as a city can use as leverage when we look at rezoning? No, we can't factor that in at all.
My opinion, but my opinion is no.
No.
So the way they've managed their current properties, we can't factor that in.
We can leverage our relationship to make them aware that we're hearing about that, but there isn't a nexus between that specific zoning request and that issue.
So I asked.
We have,
tentatively scheduled a meeting for next week to go over all of their projects, a face-to-face meeting. You know, most of our communication has been over the phone. So I think it's a good opportunity to go over the management of the association, although we have no authority to require anything. It's just something we can pass along.
One thing to keep in mind, Joe, is if they decide they're gonna go ahead and fix some of those things, and they can raise the dues to the property owners considerably, since it is
Oh, yeah.
underfunded, so.
Yeah,
it doesn't,
and when I'm talking to the resident, there's one side of, I mean, fixing a pothole isn't like a $10 project, I know, but we have concerned citizens, and we recently did something, it's worth following up on.
So the 13 townhome units that are under construction are progressing, kind of slowly. They have small crews there working on it, but they are progressing. And then the 28 additional townhome units they're also still in process. That needs to come to you for final approval, and we'll be discussing that at our meeting. There has been a new lease signed at the Elko New Market Retail Center, and they called to see if they may be able to get a building permit. It's looking at the zoning, I think it will be okay to fit into that building. It's a martial arts studio.
Can we get a damn Subway here? If anybody would like to invest in that with me,
Every time.
my God, we would
I've
kill
had
it.
multiple discussions with the owner of the Subway up at McStop.
Every time I
would
stop
kill it.
there, I ask, yeah.
Franchise is only 50 grand.
So,
I know you can get a good loan.
so what we've heard
They
from
probably
some
own this
franchises is that
area.
they want to be that side of 91 because of the confluence of traffic and the higher traffic. Because every business or every franchise, they have certain thresholds they want to meet. And that's not specific to them or even necessarily theirs, but a lot of those franchisee type places, they
Yeah.
want to be that
Ju-
side.
Actually, that is the case, that as has been communicated with me, I had another franchise owner that owned I think he owned at least 6 subways, and he was looking at a location in Elko New Market. I think he submitted a site to the corporate office, and they did not approve it, and indicated that it would need to be east of 91. Now, I believe that is true. I have no reason to believe it's not true. That's what he had told me, but I suspect it's true.
These corporations have hard and fast criteria they follow, and they usually don't bend them.
They
That was
do.
about 2
You're right.
years ago.
We just gotta keep building up that area and
I think when all the townhomes are in and the 56, 53, 56 unit apartment buildings are there,
Denser,
I think that will help considerably.
Just a quick report on building permits for the year. We've received 27 housing unit permits. 25 of them have been paid for. 2 are waiting to be picked up. And 13 of those were the townhomes. So it's 12 single family, 13 townhomes have been issued. Both are more than last year, or more than last year. I've been stepping up code enforcement, so if you receive any calls or complaints, many letters have gone out. I'm particularly targeting the older Elko area for cleanup, and
They're kind of noted in here, just, since May, I've kind of been logging the spreadsheet.
37, I think that number is now 39 since this report. So neighbors are concerned about their neighbors and what they're doing, and that their neighborhoods are looking nice. And I always tell them I appreciate the call because I want the city to look nice.
So the 37 complaints that are in the report, those are people complaining about their neighbors or to other, okay, it's not complaining that we're stepping up code enforcement.
No, it's it's
The
saying
opposite.
they're the opposite.
We're actually starting to get complaints that we're not aggressive enough in code enforcement.
Mhm.
In fact, we had a discussion with residents in a couple of neighborhoods which are starting to be now 10, 15 years old and have higher numbers of rental properties in there. And we're starting to hear those residents talk about, my neighborhood's declining, why isn't the city doing more? It's roughly proportional to what we kind of saw in the community survey, where this is starting to become an issue. This is where we think the intern is going to help, because it'll allow us to do a little bit more, which may allow us to do a better job, but also be more responsive when we're getting those complaints in, because right now it's fit in between
right.
all the other bandwidth, and so we can improve our responsiveness.
And I want you to know that I'm not doing any code enforcement at this point I'm not proactively doing any code enforcement on the parking of RVs in driveways, boats in driveways.
Primarily because there may be some policy questions that I have for the Planning Commission and Council going forward. So that might be more of an effort for next year. I suspect that if I went out and did enforcement on those, you would be getting a lot of phone calls because our ordinance is very restrictive.
And we have a substantial number of violations, but it's all recently related, we responded on a complaint basis, and this is something that's kind of proliferated over time. Part of it's cultural, part of it's just happened gradually over time. And so, in this situation, before we go out and start a brush fire, I figure we might want to come back and have a policy discussion about what we really want.
I can picture them all in my head, driving around.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you actually start actively counting it, there's more than you think.
Yeah.
There's a lot, there's a lot.
Wasn't there about 10 years of big discussion about RVs and where they were parked?
We did. There was a very extensive discussion as part of the zoning ordinance that was adopted for the merged city in late '06. And some of those commissioners are still there and remember that discussion. It was a very extensive discussion.
Very restrictive,
But
extremely.
But as with some of our ordinances, it's never been heavily enforced. We haven't kicked the tires on it, and we're also a decade down the road, and so the question becomes, is it still what we want it to be? And it's a practical issue from a staff standpoint. We're not going to go out and start whacking at the hornet's nest if we don't know that that's what the council wants, what the council wants.
And just further your information, what happens
For code enforcement, as I do it, I send out a letter. If they call me and say I'm working on it, give them a little more time. If there's no response and no cleanup, I send a second letter. If they call me and say they're working on it or need a little more time, we'll work with them. If there's no callback or no cleanup, it gets sent to the city attorney's office.
We got a very nice letter from you for the bank-owned property that needed to be mowed.
Some people get a phone call ahead of time and warning them of the letters.
My letter won't be as nice.
I'm sure you got a ration about that letter. Yeah, I got a little crap about that letter. That was noxious weeds. I don't know how I got in the noxious weed letter business, but that's now mine too.
Yeah, it wasn't even mowing, it was noxious weeds.
It is the noxious.
So I've been trying to do a little bit of proactive marketing. I've reached out to Quick Trip a couple times by email, by voicemail. I've done this in the past as well. I don't think I'm going to get any call back. Then I decided to reach out to the real estate broker for Walgreens, because I have a vision of how Elko Marketplace could work together very well with Walgreens on the corner. I did get a call back from the broker today, so I was really pleased. I never expected to hear back. So we will be submitting some
Marketing information to them next week.
Nice job.
And we do have some Park I-35 leads probably for the first time in a while. Ryan Companies continues to pursue this 1.5 million square foot distribution center. But we know that our site was submitted late last week to a company for another distribution facility. I think it was a 400,000 square foot distribution center. So we were excited that we were actually made it into the company's hands, past the brokers. And there's a planning commission meeting next Tuesday. There are no applications on the agenda, but I would continue to discuss with the commission this issue of residential lot size requirements and whether we need to look at that. So that's all that I have.
Thank you.
Parks, any questions on parks? Scale leadership did not have, they did have a meeting, but the executive committee didn't have a meeting. And I'm trying to remember what that last scale meeting was about.
It was a good one, huh?
Well, it was a long time, well, no, it was at the beginning of the month, so. Yeah.
I remember the email too that went out on that.
It wasn't anything earth-shattering, I'll tell you. MVTA did not have a meeting till the end of this month. They canceled their July meeting. I-35?
When do they have those?
It'll be
Second.
the second Thursday, so it was
Right.
this morning. No, it'll be next meeting's Thursday.
No. Because they didn't have one
It's the
the last
20 it's the
time.
23rd, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it would have been today.
No, it was,
It's the fourth Thursday of the month. Second Thursday of the month?
This is the fourth Thursday.
Second Thursday, just before scale.
Is it the
so
second
the second,
Thursday?
the ninth, it was the
second
ninth,
Thursday.
it was
There
the
we go.
ninth when I got
Second Thursday.
appointed. So am I gonna automatically, is somebody gonna notify them that I'm the new person so that they
You
can
can
give me?
notify them.
That
I don't know
would
who to
be-
notify.
That would be my job.
Okay.
So I'll take care of
Yeah,
it.
all right, just so that I can get on my calendar.
Yep.
Thanks.
They're not gonna send it to you, but.
I apologize, I should have done that already, but I'll get that taken care of.
Chamber of Commerce, anything? Regional Council of Mayors, I had to miss that for policy committee meetings.
What?
When you've got two meetings scheduled at the same time,
I'm giving you a hard time.
you know, it's, you choose the one that you're gonna have the most impact at.
That's right.
And policy committee meetings where we affect legislative policy for the metro cities, was more important than regional council mayors.
Well, we gotta stop them from doing stupid stuff sometimes, so.
You can't stop them from doing stupid stuff.
We do a lot.
CCEC?
We did meet on Tuesday night. Well, the big thing right now is Halloween. We have our subcommittees, we're gonna meet the next time, and they're all gonna update the status of where they're at. So right now, it's just all Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. The picnic, I would like to mention the Saturday picnic last Saturday was a good turnout. We figured about 200 people. Did not hear one complaint, heard a lot of compliments. We had 2 face painters that kept busy the whole time. We had a balloon twister that he could have went a couple more hours, I think, with the kids, to be honest with you. And thanks for everybody who helped out at it. And of course, we had the wonderful hot dogs.
With the mustard.
Oh, well, we had a mustard crisis, we
There's
don't
a
want to mention that.
Mustard
What did we
snafu.
discuss at CCC about the Halloween party and the tables?
Do you want to discuss that tonight, or I was going to bring it later on? We
Oh,
certainly
whatever
can.
you wanna do. I don't care, I thought you meant you were gonna be discussing.
We can bring that up. The CCEC did have a discussion regarding the upcoming Halloween party and tables. The discussion was how they felt about having politicians sponsor a table and hand out campaign literature. And it was a unanimous decision that they felt that Halloween party is for the children. It's not a format to have campaigning. So we're going to recommend, we're going to ask the council to recommend that we do not allow political campaigning at kid events.
What are we
Now I
gonna
gotta
do
go
about it?
into school hours and.
I've never had a table there, so.
That's fine.
So this was intended not to come to the council tonight because we need to have a discussion with this person about if there's any First Amendment issues with taking that, if there's a box we have to stay in or stay out of.
As
on
a
that.
candidate on a ballot, if the city doesn't want us there, I don't want to be there.
Well, I'm not worried about us, but I'm worried about,
Yeah, fair point.
It was a discussion that was brought up, and like Tom said, until Andrea's involved, we make sure there's
You
nothing.
could've just told me to be quiet, I would've been fine.
No,
with
that's,
it.
that's
No.
fine.
So
It doesn't hurt to
you're
get,
aware of it, so you can mull
Yep.
around on it, but
And think
let
about
us
it.
do a little bit of research if there's any legal issues associated with how restricted we can be with regards to, because it's a public event, it's a public location, or do we have to be cautious about how we approach it? So,
but
If
if
we
council
just
members
don't-
don't want to have a table and don't show up for to have a table, we certainly aren't going to say anything.
but you could lose out on 4 tables.
That's true.
Could lose out on a lot more than 4,
Wow.
truthfully.
Well,
It's
I
not
can-
about money, it's about
It's about the kids.
the kids.
It's always about the kids.
All, of last year, the
Wait, for city
candidates that
council,
were
not
there had a
school
lot
board,
of candy at them.
But that'll be coming back probably the next council meeting,
What's that?
yeah.
Cheesecake.
Well, she said she was gonna bring it up, so I thought maybe she forgot.
Downtown Improvement Committee,
No update since our last meeting.
50 by 30 collective impact. They had a steering committee meeting on Wednesday. I was up at the League for Metro Cities. Same, I don't know if they've had a housing committee or workforce meeting. Actually, we don't have a workforce person anymore, do we?
no, was that discussed
That was
with
a
appointments, if we were going to try and get somebody back on that or not?
It was not.
It was not at all.
Do we want to?
Actually, there, if somebody wants, we could have a person on workforce, education.
When does the workforce meet?
I can't remember. Education meets in the evening, 5 to 6:30 or something like that in Prior Lake.
Yes, I know.
Workforce, I think,
I thought that was evenings mostly, wasn't it?
workforce was meeting at like 11:30 or 12 o'clock.
Well, let
Where people are
let us
working, we
make a
talk about
phone call
workforce.
and we'll have it under administrative discussion reports next time, so.
Makes no sense.
I didn't watch what the times were this month because they all fell when I was gonna be up at the state. except for education. And by the time I spent all day up at the Capitol, I didn't feel like going to a meeting in the evening too.
We should call Tricia and see if they-
Discussion by council. Any discussion?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.